Okay, picture this. You're accused of a crime and the police seize everything. Your house, your car, your bank accounts. But then, for whatever reason, the charges get dropped. You're free to go. So, what about all your stuff? Do you just get it all back, no questions asked? Well, today we're diving into a fascinating Supreme Court case that tackles that exact problem. And trust me, the answer is not what you might think. So let's just lay the question out there. This is our legal puzzle for the day. If a criminal case gets tossed out, not because someone's proven innocent, but because of a technicality, like the trial just took too long, what happens to all the assets that were supposedly part of the crime? Does a win in court on a technicality mean you automatically win the jackpot too?
To even start to unravel this, we have to go back to a really old, really fundamental idea in our justice system. It's a principle that's been guiding courts for centuries, and it's super simple. Crime should never, ever be profitable.
Now, of course, the lawyers have a fancy Latin phrase for it, ex turpi causa non oritar actio. It basically means that you can't go to court and ask for help if your claim is based on something shameful or illegal you did. It's the ancient DNA of what we now call forfeiture law. Yeah, let's put that in plain English. The courts just will not lend their power to help you profit from your own wrongdoing. You can't use the justice system to get your ill-gotten gains back. The system refuses to be an accomplice, you know? And here's the key. This idea isn't just about punishing a person, it's about the property itself being tainted by crime. And that brings us to the case that put this whole idea to the test in the modern age, R.V. Nguyen. This is a wild story about an alleged family-run cannabis operation and a constitutional glitch that really threw a wrench in the works. Okay, so here's the quick rundown. Back in 2013, police kick off an investigation into a suspected pot-growing operation in Montreal. It gets bigger, expanding all the way out to BC. By 2016, one person pleads guilty. But then, in 2017, the whole thing comes to a screeching halt for the rest of the family. The charges are stayed, which means they're put on hold indefinitely because the case took way too long to get to trial, and that violated their constitutional rights. And we're not talking about a couple of plants in a closet here. Just to give you a sense of the scale, police found 845 cannabis plants at just one of the houses. So they had gathered a pretty significant amount of evidence. The money involved was also pretty serious. Authorities froze over $170,000 that was sitting in a bunch of different bank accounts tied to the family members. And on top of the cash, we're talking about 3 different homes in the Vancouver area, super valuable real estate, that were also frozen by court order, all believed to be proceeds of crime. So, with the criminal charges now basically gone, the million-dollar question is, what happens to all this stuff? Before this case ever got to the Supreme Court, it was an absolute mess. Seriously, the lower courts were all over the place, they couldn't agree on what to do, and it created this kind of jurisdictional maze that just shows you how confusing this part of the law can be. Now, to get why they were so confused, you have to understand there are 2 different ways the government can take property. The first is tied directly to a criminal trial. You get convicted, and as part of your sentence, you forfeit the property. Simple. But the second way is totally separate. It's an independent process that just looks at the property itself to see if it's criminally tainted, whether or not the owner ever gets convicted. And that distinction, well, it's everything in this case. So check out this legal ping-pong match. The first court in Quebec says, yeah, we can look at forfeiture, but only under these specific rules. The next court up, the Superior Court, agrees. They say, yep, the hearing can go ahead. But then it gets to the Court of Appeal, and they just blow the whole thing up. They say a stay is pretty much the same as an acquittal, and since there was no conviction, the government has absolutely no right to even try and take the property. Case closed. So, with the lower courts in total disagreement, the whole mess gets punted up to the Supreme Court of Canada. It's their job to finally step in, untangle this legal knot, and give everyone a clear answer. And the court's decision starts with this really powerful statement, which brings us right back to where we started. They said that courts should not be in the business of helping crime along by returning criminally tainted property to unclean hands. I mean, that quote right there tells you pretty much everything you need to know about where their heads were at. Okay, so let's boil their decision down into 3 simple parts. First, they said a stay of proceedings is not the same as an acquittal when we're talking about property. An acquittal is about a person's freedom. This is about assets. Second, they agreed that, yeah, you can't use forfeiture laws that are tied to a conviction because, well, there was no trial. But, and this is the absolute game changer, they ruled that those other independent forfeiture laws can still be used. They created a whole separate path for the government to argue its case. So what's the bottom line? Well, the Supreme Court didn't actually decide who gets the property. Instead, they sent the case all the way back down to the lower court. But this time, that court has a crystal clear mission: hold a hearing and figure out one thing. Is this property, all on its own, criminally tainted? So believe it or not, this fight still isn't over. So why are we talking about this? Why does one complicated case matter? Well, this ruling is actually a really big deal for how our justice system handles the profits of crime, especially in situations where criminal cases fall apart for reasons that have nothing to do with guilt or innocence. This right here is the big takeaway. The Supreme Court drew a very bright line in the sand. They completely separated the fate of a person from the fate of their property. It means that even if you walk away from criminal charges on a technicality, you might not be walking away with the cash and houses. It all comes back to that one powerful idea: crime must not pay. And that leaves us with this huge fundamental tension, doesn't it? On one side, we have an individual's right to their property, which is a cornerstone of our society. And on the other, we have this massive public interest in making sure that nobody gets rich from breaking the law. This case gives us an answer for now, but that core debate, well, that's one that's going to be with us for a long, long time.